Mothership's podcast has officially launched. We had built a UFO.
Yeah, but we don't know how to drive it.
And we're talking about data that is people's data, so it's even more sensitive.
There are so many perspectives that you can look at in terms of data. We need to be, as humans, to drive value, hyper-specialized.
Boggles, did I say that? Did I say that enough? Boggles my mind. Hello everybody, welcome to the Beyond podcast. Mothership's podcast has officially launched, and what better way to launch than with our first ever guest, Terri Gallagher.
Thank you, honored to be your first.
Thanks,
no pressure,
Jen.
We're gonna crush it.
Thanks
I know
a
we
lot.
are. Yeah.
Yes, no pressure. And we're gonna have, another first coming. So I'm gonna have my female first, and then I'm gonna have my male first. And you'll see who he is. That's gonna be a little surprise.
Yep.
Surprise
Guest star.
Yes, coming soon.
Well known, an influencer in his own right.
Absolutely, all day, every day. And we are coming at you live from LA Live, from Los Angeles, in LA Live, downtown LA. We actually are here for the ProcureCon conference. Terri is attending. She's been a speaker. She's sponsored the event. And it's actually my first time coming to ProcureCon and meeting all the great people that are here. So it's so far a great event. I haven't got to see as much of it as I'd like to. I plan on doing more of it in the future, but I did get to come and sit down with my great friend Terri. So today, we are going to cover a few very important topics, and really all with the one key theme, which is about connection, and about connecting data so that we can connect people to work much more easily, much more seamlessly, and as we like to say, with a click of a button and at warp speed. So, I have a few questions today for Terri.
Oh, goody.
And I wrote them down, and I'm going to list them, and then we also have another guest that'll pop in to talk about something very important along the lines of what we're addressing today. So,
Excellent.
Terri Gallagher.
Bring it.
Are you ready?
Bring it.
Okay, so understanding the UFO is what we're calling this one. And of course, mothership lingo for the unidentified flying object. When Mothership coded our tech many years ago, we realized that we had built a UFO. We thought everyone was going to understand what we're doing. Yep. Everyone gets it.
I'm all too familiar with that concept.
Right?
Yes.
And of course, this is what needs to be done, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And then we realized that the market wasn't ready. The market didn't understand it. And, since then, we have been really learning and understanding the client, understanding their needs. And Terri can really speak to that too. So Terri, what is going on? Why is it not understandable? Why is there a UFO in the room? Tell me more about that, and then how do we, get to the other side?
So, use the analogy of a UFO. UFOs people are curious about them. They believe in them, right? They know that it's not something that is not of this world. And I think very similar to what you're doing around talent and technology is that the traditional employment construct of, you go hire someone, you go recruit them in a traditional way is really on its way out. And the layers between the talent and who wants to hire them is going away. And technology is really kind of stepping in to be that delivery system and that enabler and that curator. And even though there's huge demand for the outputs, better, faster, cheaper talent, being able to leverage your own workforce in a way that is much more efficient and automated, everyone wants those outputs, but it's still a very new concept from that traditional employment construct. So they're not afraid of the UFO. They don't think it's this big, strange thing. I think the big, strange thing is how do you connect this to the talent, or how do you connect this to the organization's pain? How do you find a way to integrate it into their systems, into their existing systems that have been around 15, 20 years? And what does that look like? But they absolutely want all of those outputs.
They want it and they get it.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a new thing, that they wanted and get it, or do you think that they've wanted it and they got it from the get-go, they just couldn't implement it?
Well, they definitely wanted, if you look at all of the surveys out there, surveying customers that want to leverage talent marketplaces, of the $5 trillion in spend that we have in the gig economy, 90% of that is in freelancer, statement of work, direct sourcing, talent marketplaces, 90%.
Wow.
So it's there, and a lot of the companies are already embracing this workforce. They're just not doing it in a very strategic and thoughtful way. They don't understand it. So I think that there is huge appetite for bringing together this workforce in a way that they understand and understanding the technology, but they need a steward to kind of help them connect the dots and go in and say, this is how this is going to work within your ecosystem. And you can't just give them this big sexy UFO and say, isn't this amazing? You know, and they're like, yeah, but we don't know how to drive it.
What do I do with this thing?
Yeah, and they're like, I'll show you how to drive it.
Right. So
how
you
am I
think
doing with the
people
UFO analogy?
I
Like,
love it. I love it.
I'm going with it. You
I
know what
love
I mean?
it,
that
and
you
you're
brought it
right.
up.
It's all about
Yeah.
learning how to pilot your ship.
Yes.
And sometimes when you're going on a new journey
Yeah.
and into uncharted territory, everybody wants to turn that baby around, right? But you do need to take the journey, take the road less traveled, because it pays dividends and it opens up a whole new world of possibilities and opportunities.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Terri. Great. All right. So, anything else you want to share there on the UFO?
No, I think we crushed it.
I think we crushed it.
Let's keep going.
Let's just keep going. Let's just keep.
That's what we do.
let's
That's
keep
what we
flying
women
this
do. That's what
baby.
we women entrepreneurs do.
We do that. We
Yeah,
do. That's
yeah.
what we do. So, number 2, exploring HR tech and what we call CAS, which is Conduit as a Service. So, what is your understanding of that, Terri? Like from a data connection standpoint, what do you think that, you know, clients and viewers out there can understand about the conduit and about the connection? And Terri and I were very thoughtful about this conversation, just to give a little bit of context, because, you know, there's been a lot of talk in the space that we're in about, you know, this one doesn't belong here or that one doesn't belong here, and these players should step out, and these are, you know, these other organizations should step aside, and there are issues. I'm not going to lie and say that there aren't issues, but we're trying to tackle these issues with an inclusive process. One
Inclusive.
that is about including everybody, connecting everybody, bringing everyone to the table. No one's excluded. And the importance of that, I think, is huge for not just solving the supply issue, right? Making sure that we have a fit for every role out there, for every job, for every project, for every gig. There is a match, and a really good match. You need a hell of a lot of volume of talent in order to do that. You need an ecosphere in order to do that. And then, of course, there's a lot of other benefits. So what are your benefits, Terri, to the conduit, to the connection piece, to the HR tech piece? Tell us why it's important.
So I think, and data is a big part of this as well too, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but the word conduit means being that connector. So anything that interferes with that, right? Too many layers, too many people, too many hands kind of destroys the concept of conduit, right? So the conduit is really just the gateway, the enabler for this massive talent community that is sitting in other places other than staffing, or they're sitting in other places other than in perm employment. They want to work as an independent. And so this conduit is really, the conduit is kind of the gateway to go find them and to bring them in and to bring them to the customer in a way that makes sense and is automated and is easy to understand. So I think conduit is a beautiful way to explain that. And I think the other piece of conduit is, because it's such a wide concept, right? It's about outreach and bringing in all of this talent and all of this community to the customers that want to employ them. There's also a tremendous opportunity for capturing data around this workforce, a much wider range of workforce. So how they like to be employed, how quickly are they being employed, what is their skill set, how do you kind of leverage all of those data points to match them to the opportunities. Where I think we get stuck is having all of these gating concepts around bringing workers to the table. And by enabling this conduit and making sure that it's as open and as wide and as inclusive as it can be, that's the optimum opportunity to not only capture this workforce, but all of the data around the workforce, instead of going to all of these different disintermediated places. And we actually have somebody here that has a strong opinion on that. So we're going to introduce him. He's our guest speaker.
Yes, so we have a great guest today. Chris will be joining us. And Chris is going to jump in and talk about the data connection piece, because you know, not everybody understands data, and data is a very broad term on its own. And there's you know, there's many kinds of data, there's lots of information, there's lots of information systems. And we're talking about data that is people's data. So it's even more sensitive when it gets to, you know, people and really the data that makes up that individual person. And there's a lot of nuance that goes into a person. In general. So we're bringing Chris for this. I think that I'm going to step out for a minute, and I'm going to have Chris come in and talk to you about why he thinks data is important, what he understands about the conduit and data connection, how it's missing in the market, and how we can fix it.
Chris in the hood,
Good
thank
to see
you.
you
So
again.
good to see you. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Mothership and
Yeah,
Ilyse.
yeah. So we talked data, so I was like, I'm out of this. So Chris has been so kind to kind of join us impromptu and offer his experience around data strategy.
Chris Radvansky, I am the founder and owner of Rad Consultants. We are a workforce analytics consultancy, really focused on total talent management with a good history within the contingent labor and flexible contingent working arrangements. And really bringing data more so to the forefront. I think everybody has acknowledged that, yeah, data is the new oil. It's powering a lot of...
The new oil, I love that, yeah.
Yes. It's powering a lot of the decisions that are being made, or at least we're hoping that it does more so. So trying to bring that to the forefront around the HR processes, full-time employees, contingent workers, SOW, all in a time of AI and skills-based organization. So a lot to be considered.
So one of the things, and I kind of started this, is we talked about the conduit and this wide range of talent and being able to bring in different forms of talent that may not be an employee or may not be with a staffing firm. They may be independent, like the gentleman behind the video here, video camera, or they may be somebody that's just working for a week, a month, 6 months, but they're still vital to that organization, and their data is still vital, right?
Absolutely.
Not only, like we talked about personal data, which is, you know, that's got its own thing, but how they like to work, their skill set, what are they doing, how quickly are they coming in, is this working, that kind of thing. So maybe speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are...
Does that make sense, right?
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. There are so many perspectives that you can look at in terms of data, and so many different goals that people have, that why does data matter to this person differently than to that person, right? Hiring managers, business leaders, staffing suppliers, maybe if you're dealing with an MSP or a VMS.
So everybody's got their own kind of
goals.
What they want to see, own data goals.
Absolutely,
Love
absolutely.
that.
And only when you know what those goals are can you then start establishing some way to analyze the data and a way to tee it up in a way that's going to make sense for your end audience. If you're just creating it in a silo, in a vacuum, and you're saying, listen, this person's smart, we gave them the raw data, they have all that they need, different data sets, and say go. That person's going to say, sweet, I love working with some data, and here we go.
Yeah.
But they're going to go in with their perspective. You know, we talk a lot about diversity within HR. You need to have not only diversity of skill sets and of people, but also of perspective, right? And through having diverse perspectives when it comes to, all right, how does this hiring manager versus this supplier versus this VMS or MSP, how do they want to address it? A lot of different perspectives to be taken into account. Now, when it comes to Mothership and conduit as a service and really considering the entire ecosystem, I'm sure there's a treasure trove of data that will become available and that can be up for analysis. And because Mothership is very much AI enabled, I'm thrilled to be really exploring what that can mean.
Right.
One thing I've talked to people about is the need for HR folks to become not necessarily data literate, but data comfortable. And to be able to feel comfortable sitting at a table, talking about data, understanding, well, what was this based on, what does it include, what does it not include. With AI, you're looking at a situation where folks don't need to know syntax around data. They don't need to be intimidated by it. OpenAI, Claude 3,
That's true. There's been a little socialization already with AI, right?
Yeah, and it's all natural
Love that.
language processing. You
Yeah.
know? So you don't need to know where a comma goes or a square bracket versus a parentheses. You just need to converse with your data. And through working with systems, new systems that are not legacy, that are not difficult to lift and shift, to be able to jump in with something that's brand new, that is AI first, is something that is really going to bring us into a new generation of HR enablement.
But I love what you said about everybody's got their own thing that they're concerned about with the data, their own part of the story that is of interest to them,
Yeah.
right? And how do you help them curate that story? Because you said something very powerful, like you can't just give them the data and have at it. They don't even know what they're looking at, and they don't know how to extract their part of the story that is of interest. So can you speak to that piece a little bit?
Absolutely. You need to really understand, have a conversation. You know, within the contingent labor sphere, there are programs that are first gen. You've never engaged with contingent labor at all, and you're just setting the boundaries. You're just building the basement, essentially, right? And so that person is going to have very different requirements versus somebody that, let's say, is a third gen, or they're looking to go in-house with their
That's
MSP,
true.
or they're looking to, again, to enable technology more
They
so.
want more trending. They want more like high level.
Yep, and they have benchmarking. They can say, how do we do this month versus last year at the same time versus the year prior at the same time? A brand new program is not going to be able to answer any of those questions.
That's true.
They're
not
just
even
going to put their thumb in the wind. And
They're going to be lower level of Maslow's hierarchy of need. They're just trying to survive and get the thing going and get table stakes data.
put up a roof and give me some bread.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you need to have conversations with your folks
Interesting.
within this ecosystem. Again, it comes back to goals, comes back to having a business mindset, not just a data mindset. I love data, but if it's just data for the sake of data, you need to have data and recommendations. You need to have recommendations with data. So always around a business focus.
So I think in closing, what would you recommend for Mothership just as a data strategy or the data story? Is it data or data? How do you say it?
The lovely thing is I say it both in the same sentence.
All right, because like if it's a faux pas, I would hope you'll correct me and not let me go this long like saying it wrong. But like if you were Mothership, like how would you be looking at this, as you said, treasure trove of data that is very powerful and valuable? How would you think about incorporating that into their story?
I'm a believer in structure and documentation and order and process. I do believe that you need to have somebody that is dedicated within your organization, whatever organization that is the data steward, chief data officer, chief AI
CDO,
officer is another role that's expanding now. So really having somebody as the go-to person, not somebody that is client services, that it's operations, that also, hey, they're pretty good with data, maybe we should ask them to also do this. Hell no, you can't do that anymore. That is no longer how
Well, that's what we
companies
would
can be
do with our
successful.
clients. Like when they get into like data strategy for the programs we're implementing, we want to have you put you in front of them,
Right.
have that conversation.
Yeah, so happy to be part of that conversation because we need to be, as humans, to drive value, hyper-specialized. We need to say, I am good at this niche, within this niche, within this niche. I'm, again, HR analytics, contingent labor analytics, total talent management analytics. A lot of people say, well, why would you confine yourself to such a niche space? There's conferences on this niche space, but at the same time, there's a lot of
That's
education.
massive in size, but anyway, yeah.
Yes, but there's a lot of education, even within the HR space, where people say, well, what do you mean? There's enough meat on that bone to warrant that specialization? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So
I love it.
Just focusing more on your goals, but recognizing that, listen, we shouldn't make a recommendation, we shouldn't make a decision without enough evidence, without enough data to say, to justify that next step.
Wow, powerful. Thank you. I'm so glad you decided to like be our surprise guest.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, pleasure.
So I jumped into Terri's seat because when I heard what Chris was saying about the data and about how important it is, and especially the important data, you know, I had to sit down and jump in because Mothership has a proprietary process. Like we have taken a long time to design the data points that we collect from workers And the reason we collect them is to really get to know them so that we can make a proper match and we can properly connect them with work. It boggles my mind. Boggles, did I say that enough? Boggles my mind that we are doing this on a two-dimensional resume today. 2024, we're matching people, three-dimensional people, with a piece of paper.
Yeah.
With a limited amount of data points, a limited amount of sections, and people are not limited. People are not defined by a piece of paper. All the other people in the room don't know how to define that person by looking at this piece of paper. Okay, they're not, psychic. They're not fortune tellers, right? They're humans, and they're very smart and very, obviously skilled. But it's too much to ask of them as well to be able to really look into this crystal ball and to say whether or not somebody else will be a match for a job. And of course, they have analytical brains, they're analytical thinkers. This is major. But as your point, Chris, nothing is more analytical than data. And of course, the minds of humans have created all the things. So what do you think as far as the important pieces of data of a person? What are your top priorities when you're talking about what are the important pieces to capture? And it just gives people a framework to understand what data is important. Obviously, we think all the data is important because it all has a place.
Yeah.
And I think placement of data is sometimes more of a question than do I use this data or not? I think all data is probably usable. It's about where and for what purpose. So what is your take on the resume, how antiquated it is, how many data points it has compared to digital wallets and this more sophisticated credentialing process that we have today? That's my question.
Yes, no, I think that's, thank you for asking it. I think that skills-based organizations, skills-based hiring is really the future. There is a lot of movement towards getting rid of education requirements. That's no secret. A lot of companies have dedicated themselves to that, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion, bringing on folks that are from underrepresented groups. So that's very important. But really, what does the candidate, what does the worker, what does the person, what do they want to do? What can they do, right? What can they do today? Therefore, let's put in some kind of a skills assessment associated with what the hiring manager is looking for, okay? So what can they do today? If they check off that box and then we say, okay, terrific, they're good at doing that technical skill, whether it's SQL, whether it's Python, whether it's some other kind of operational device. But then you say, okay, well, we need to make sure that they also have a human element. Nowadays, the soft skills are generally lacking based upon a lot of the industry articles that you see. So they can write SQL, they can write Python, but they don't know how to respect other people. They don't know how to write an email to a client. They don't know how to reserve themselves when faced with a tough situation.
Right.
So those are the things that a skills assessment is going to be pretty difficult to assess.
Right.
So therefore, do not throw away the human element by any stretch. I do know that as AI and technology continues to advance, they're going to say, well, we can automate that. We can bring in AI tools to remove the need for the hiring manager to have a conversation until the very last minute that we're going to make that decision. But there needs to be an intentional decision made to say, all right, we love data. We like that we can even quantify, qualitative data, and you can qualify quantitative data. But you need to also say, is this person going to fit in? Are they going to be a cultural fit? Are they going to be a cultural add? Regardless, culture comes with people, right? So you need to make sure that the data that you're collecting from these people is associated with the things that they can do today, and also how will that skill, if they have SQL, where are they going to advance from there? Are they going to go to Python? Are they going to go to machine learning? And envision their future within your organization. And that can all, again, be based upon data.
Right, and then to take that a step further, before we get Terri back in here, I think that the role of humans is still so important.
Of course. I like humans. You like humans?
I love humans. I love humans. Don't get me wrong. I'm all about humans. And I'm also about humans doing things that are more human, right? And the data collection piece is such an important piece because having those conversations, right? And having anyone's workforce within these organizations understand data and how to qualify and how to quantify it, I think couldn't be more important, because when you have a hiring manager sitting down with someone and they're having a conversation, a lot of the times they don't even know that they're collecting data.
Yeah.
They're getting a picture of this person, they're getting information on this person, they're getting the pieces of the puzzle to put together to see if this person is a fit for a specific job or a role. And it's very transactional in that moment where they're getting that data sometimes, and then that data is getting what I call dropped on the floor when the person is placed with the job, as though it doesn't matter anymore. But that data is so important to record it, to keep it, to track it. You get to see how people move and change, how their preferences move and change. How is John today? How has John grown, today compared to tomorrow? All of these things are not quantified. They're not analyzed today. And they are everything, because John and his journey and all the data points that make up that person, there are many of them. They are plentiful. They run hard skills, they run soft skills, they run every other which way, because humans are multifaceted and they bring their whole selves to work. So I think first and foremost, even just to educate every organization's employees on data understanding, data analysis, data collection, is already a great starting point, because if people can already start to record the information that they know about people and that they're learning about them, they won't have to forget it, recall it later. They can go back and they can refer to this data, they can refer to this information, and it can support them and support these individuals so that they don't have to repeat themselves over and over again to every hiring manager. And every hiring manager doesn't have to remember every piece of every person that they meet, because it's an incredibly special job that they do, and they're so good at it. But that's very hard. It's a very hard job for them to do, especially at scale, when they're dealing with a lot of people, a lot of jobs, and a lot of different skill sets.
Yeah, and so much of what you said there is personally identifiable information, right? It's
right.
And that's something around compliance that a lot of companies need to be aware of. There are always emerging regulations, especially in the EU with GDPR.
Right.
California has a lot of very specific labor laws. So even though companies want to capture as much data as possible, because again, I'm all about data-driven decisions. Let's make good decisions based upon evidence.
They're not allowed to.
But you need to recognize a person's right to be deleted from a certain database.
Right.
So you need to have processes in place, structure in place to say, okay, listen, they've opted out from this field, this recording, whatever the case might be,
right.
And we need to honor that. So we need 100%.
To
be respectful of people and their human rights. We need to be respectful of the law, of course, because
right.
that comes with regulatory fines if you're not.
Right.
So now, if there is a situation where, listen, we have a treasure trove, and the folks that we're engaging with, the workers, they trust us, and boom, we have access to absolutely everything, then yes, there is a really nice golden house on the hill that you can make a lot of really great decisions with. But there's going to be restrictions, I would say, most of the time, in terms of like, is there a blank field? Is there a field that we should go upstream and say, well, this is a required field, or this is a date field, and it's being entered in as text? All those different things that you run into constantly.
Right, right.
But ultimately,
very real, very, very complicated.
Yeah, but ultimately it is a people business. HR is very people driven. A lot of folks are like, I don't want to deal with data too much. I want to make connections, and that's terrific. But you need to be able to augment those connections with data.
Right, and have process in place so that the work that those people are doing is not dollars dropped on the floor for their employers and not dollars dropped on the floor for them. They don't have to keep repeating the same work. They can actually progress beyond that to a different level and a different function that is just as important, but gives them even more results at what they're trying to do, because they're now armed with this additional data and this additional knowledge that it makes it a lot easier for them to do a lot more of it and a lot faster.
There you go.
So we talked about all the things. I think the biggest thing to talk about is the pain, and the implementation piece. So Terri is an amazing implementer. She's an incredible consultant who does incredible work. She's very well versed in this industry. She's seen so many solutions. She knows what's out there. So let's talk about some of the solutions, right? Workday, for example. How does Workday compare and contrast to the platform world that we know very well? How are they doing in the data connection piece and overall as an organization? And again, not to cut anyone down, because Workday and Mothership play very nicely together.
Right.
But people somehow think that we're the same, and we're not.
Oh God, no.
So let's speak to some of that, and then I'd love you to talk about the implementation piece of what you do and how important that is.
So I think you've got to kind of start with looking at the customer where they are and the systems they do have, Workday or SuccessFactors or whatever that is, and looking at their current environment, and then looking at the pain. So the pain is always typically the same pain. We want more access to different types of talent from other supply chains. We want better quality, we want faster talent, and we want to participate in talent marketplace, and we want to participate in on-demand workforce platforms, whatever that means to them. So this will solve the pain because they get to widen the net for talent and bring in this better, faster, cheaper talent. But once you get to the client's organization, they have these products, HRIS products, that are not necessarily designed to embrace the conduit, so to speak. So you really have to go to where the customer is and figure out what that's going to look like. Workday and some of the other products out there, amazing tools, but they were not designed for this. They were designed to do what they do very well, which is human resource management, right? But you have to play nice in the sandbox with these products. So being able to look at the pieces of that product you may need to integrate or do an API, or pieces of it you need to touch because it's still talent, right? And what does that look like, and understanding that and being able to implement around that and still get all of the outputs that these clients want to solve the pain. So I think the key is to have respect for the incumbent products that are there, because they're not going away, and how do you kind of work with them, and how do you to integrate, or how do you get data feeds or data feeds going in and out, or APIs, whatever that looks like, to include them in that ecosystem. But I think the biggest mistake that a lot of your competition makes, and some of these other products is solution providers make, is that they're so in love with where they are and what they do and their tech, they're not considering where the customer is and the products that they have and HRIS products that they have and their readiness. So you really have to be able to help them connect the dots, maybe even incrementally bringing in your tech and where does that fit in, and being able to solve for that. And that's good solution design, that's good workflow design. That's where we spend most of our time, but they absolutely want to bring these solutions in. But that's hands down the biggest mistake I see your competition, some other products out there making, and solution providers, is that you come to us. This is what we do. This is how we navigate the talent supply chain, and you guys just figure it out. You can't. You got to go to them, and you've got to integrate or have the APIs
with their current systems.
Yes,
right. So
yes.
The point that Terri's making is that there's a misconception out there that clients think to integrate a marketplace or an expert system or a conduit as a service system, that they would have to abandon their current systems or abandon their current relationships or really their setup. And right, what she's saying is that it doesn't have to be done that way. It could be done with integrations, with APIs, with connection, which is exactly what we're talking about today, first and foremost. And when I think about the Workday piece, by the way, and where I think that a lot of people miss it, is that I think of marketplace and the platform, a total talent platform, as the talent as the customer, as much as the client is the customer, right? And my perception of Workday is that they're so good at taking care of the client, and they're so good at taking care of the talent as well, to a certain extent, because they've done it all these years and they've They've, taking care of the client is also taking care of the talent, because if no one's there to employ you, then nobody wins. But what we bring, and what I think platforms bring, especially in the talent marketplace ecosphere, is that focus on the talent as the customer, the focus on the talent's journey.
Do you think that that's a shift? Because you look at kind of like what the mandate's been before, like you're just lucky to have a job.
Right.
You're lucky, and if you get a
We're all lucky to have each other. Because the thing is that it's 100% that you could look at it and say, oh, you're lucky to have a job. But you're lucky to have a worker. And you're lucky to fill a role. And you're lucky to have productivity. And you're lucky to have this talent. And it's 100% yin and yang. It is 100% one hand washes the other. One hand does not get washed without the other. And even with AI coming to the table and with robotics, I think that there is perhaps a misconception that, oh, well, we don't need you anymore because now we might have robots and machines to do the job. But by the way, those robots and machines are also going to have to be understood properly in order to operate properly. And if not, we're all going to have a problem on our hands, including the hiring managers and including the employers. So absolutely, I think it's a shift, but I think it's a very, very important shift that I hope we make now, and we don't learn it the hard way later when we've created things that could turn on us.
But the candidates have the power now. The talent has the power.
Well, I think everybody has the power. I think you're right. I think talent has more power than they ever had.
Exactly.
And I think that happened during COVID, but I think they've also been losing some of that at times. And it depends on the role. And in these times, we see it. I mean, we represent such great, workforce. And doesn't mean that they're not great. It could just mean that there's not a fit for them, or there's not something right there at that moment that's exactly what they're looking for, which is another reason why this connected ecosphere is so important. But I think, yes, the talent's become more important, but I don't think it's just happened because of a power shift. I think it's happened because the knowledge rests and sits there. And AI and businesses and nothing moves without knowledge. And I think that when you really realize that workers are knowledge workers, and that the key, they hold the key.
I think some of that is also, they've always had the knowledge, but now they're saying, wait a minute, I have some power in this situation. I can decide how, when, and where I want to work. Because
they have more
talent
options.
is the lifeblood. Like, if you don't have talent, you don't have a company. And I think that that's the power shift, is like, people are waking up and saying, what I have and what I contribute is extremely valuable.
Right.
And this is why you see a lot of people getting into independent consulting, because you will never ever get laid off or be at the whim of a stock price, or because you have a marketable skill.
Right.
And that's power.
Right. And I think that this is an amazing topic that we're going to do more of, because we're going to be bringing in a lot of our talent about how they feel, because we're speaking on their behalf. And we have these conversations, and you're right.
All the time.
They don't feel safe anymore because they're not getting taken care of. The AI and robotics thing is only, pouring more fuel on that fire. I think that there's always a standoff and then a coming together between both sides. And I think the sooner that both sides respect each other, play nicely together, and connect with each other, the better off everybody will be. And I don't think it's a I'm more important than you situation. I think it's really that everyone's important. And let's just say that and do that. And I think that if we can do that with integrity, and if employers can do that with integrity, meaning they can allow workers to work any which way and not expect workers to sell their whole life to them for a very menial and non-retirable income. I think when everybody starts to come to the table and give a little bit, there's going to be a lot more opportunity for everybody.
Completely agree. That's it on that note.
That's it. What else do we have to say? I think we're done.
That's awesome.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, I love this conversation
Thank
with
you
you,
for inviting
Terri.
me.
Of course.
A little fireside chat, because there's a fire over there. You guys can see it's kind of cold out here, so they started that up for us.
Yes, we did. And just to recap, talking about data, talking about connection, talking about how everyone's important in the room, and getting to those important talent conversations, and we'll be getting to those very important client conversations.
Yes, the
as
most important
well.
part. The
Well,
clients
they're
are the
all
most important. We wouldn't be here without them.
Yes, we
Yeah.
wouldn't be here without them, but we wouldn't be here without Terri either.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank you, Ilyse.
and all the great people that we represent, we wouldn't be here without you either. So
Well
thank you
said.
all.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Terri.
Thank you.
See you next time.